Alrighty, let's go ahead and do source maps first, and then we will build up our production configuration. Our production configuration is going to be really simple. So for source maps, we need another node package, which is usually how most things start off with in Node. And what we need to do is I'm going to install something called, so I'm going to do npm install, but I'm going to do -- save because this is a runtime dependency. I'm not doing save dev, I'm doing save because this is something that we're going to need installed even on our production servers. And the package name is simply source-map-support. So load that in. And with that loaded in, basically what source map support does is it kind of actually goes in and it auto wires source map support right into the Node runtime, which is really awesome. Now browsers understand source maps. Firefox, Chrome, IE, they all understand source maps, but Node doesn't. But source map support makes it happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my entry file. So remember, this is server.js, the entry to our application. And the first line that I'm going to do is import source-map-support/register. That's it. By importing that one module, we now have source map support. So let's test that out. Let's build our Webpack server by invoking our server with Webpack by invoking Webpack. And then let's invoke the server and check this out. We get that error bleh. We get that line of code that it happened on, but check this out right here. We actually have source server server.js line 6. What is line 6 of server.js? It's this line right here. So even though the error was thrown over here on line 54, in our error messages, we now can see exactly where in our code it was thrown in. So that is awesome. So now we have a much easier time debugging. All right, let's do our production build. What is our production build? Basically, it's going to be the exact same, except we're going to minify things. So to do that, I'm going to come up here to our webpack.server, and I'm going to need to import the Webpack package. So up here at the top, I'm going to say webpack equals require webpack. And then down here, in our create config, I'm going to say const plugins equals array. And I'm going to say if not is debug, then plugins.push new webpack.optimize.uglify JS plugin. So basically, I'm creating a plugins array that's going to contain all of our Webpack plugins. And if we're not in debug mode, I'm going to add the Uglify JS plugin. So now that we're not done yet, all we've done is created this array of plugin objects. It's not going to do anything because we haven't added it to the config. To add it to the config, I'm simply going to scroll down to the bottom of the configuration, and I'm going to say plugins is plugins. And that's it. So now coming back over here, let's run this. Well, actually, if we ran this, we'll still get the same code, the same result. And that's because when we run Webpack from the command line, it's going to default to whatever was exported by module exports, which at this moment is create config with the isDebug flag set to true. So let's just, for purposes of testing, go ahead and set create config to false so that we're simulating a production build. We'll change it back in a moment, but for now, we're going to do that, and then we're going to run this configuration again. And we get admitted. Notice, first of all, how small this is. 510 bytes compared to 2.06 kilobytes. The source map is larger because it has to have more stuff in it. But if we take a look at build server.js, look at that. That is our code now. So a lot of really interesting things happened here. Our Webpack runtime went away, and everything just got concatenated into this one node module. And now if we came back here and ran node build /server, I still get that error, of course, error bleh, and I am currently not quite getting my source maps working correctly, but we can take a look at that later. But let's go ahead and actually make it not throw an error. So I'm going to go to source server server. I'm going to take off that, and I'm going to remove that, and I'm going to say console log from server. Come back here, recompile it, Now, the compilation will take longer, of course, because we're minifying. And if I run build server, then it works. So this is something we'd want to do in production because it reduces a lot of the weight of our module by reducing the amount of things that have to be parsed, and uglifies everything and makes it production ready. But yeah. So before I forget, let's jump back into our webpack.server.js and change our default configuration to isDebug is true. So that if we try to build from Webpack from the command line, by default, we'll get a debug build, which is generally what you would want. I'm going to do one last thing in this video. And that is, right now, what we need to do in order to run this application, we need to run this Webpack config, and then we need to do node build server. See, what I want to do instead is our Webpack, we won't ever really be using Webpack directly except for testing our configs. We're going to be using gulp to manage invoking Webpack. But for this node build server, if someone were to throw you this application, say, hey, I want you to run this on my server, it's not so obvious that we need to invoke this build server file. So what I want to do is I want to open up my package.json, and I want to write a npm script. And this is the convention of how you would write a production node application. You would write a script called start. Now, I don't care about tests. We're not doing tests in this series, so I'll remove the test script. But I'm going to add a start script, which is a special command in npm that is the convention of starting a server. And I'm going to say start is simply node build server. So we're taking that node build server that we had to type all the time, and we're making it easier and more standard to invoke. So most server infrastructure will understand the start command. So if we come back here and now type in npm start and hit enter, it invokes our build server for us. So now it's much easier for a person who knows nothing about this project to look in and say, oh, they have a start script. So that's obviously what happens when you need to start it. But with that, that is our Webpack configuration for our server. So the next step now is to make a gulp file that will create development builds, production builds, and also watch, where we can incrementally compile our server code, and not only that, use nodemon to restart our process whenever anything changes. And that's going to be what we're going to be using for our debug workflow. And we'll see you guys then.